When we moved into our current house, I was excited. It was a new neighborhood, a fresh start. It was more room for the kids. But I was also really overwhelmed because we'd loved where we came from. We'd made some of the dearest friends of our lives there, and leaving them was just gut wrenching. Our kids were young, and we were moving to a place where we had zero family and zero close friends nearby. So there was this whole layer of, okay, we're rebuilding our social world completely from scratch. That was a lot all by itself. And then, as the movers were bringing in our furniture and our boxes, I spotted these four cardboard boxes still sealed up with old tape. The tape was yellow because those boxes had been traveling with us for over a decade. They had been sealed since our very first family move out of Chicago. And in all the moves after that, we had never once cut that tape. I knew roughly what was in them. There were awards from my old corporate job, a job that I'd worked really hard at and genuinely loved. My ID badge was in there, some of my husband's college and grad school books and mementos that he wanted to keep. The movers brought the boxes in, and I did exactly what I'd done at every other house. I moved them straight into a closet without opening them. Same as always, except this time, a little while after the movers left and the house was sort of quiet, I walked past that closet and I stopped and I asked myself, why can't I just let this go? It wasn't an annoyed question. It was a curious one because I'm a practical person. I make decisions fine. So why was I still carrying four boxes unopened from a chapter of my life that I'd been out of for years? And it turns out, when I finally sat with that question for a bit, the answer was kind of fascinating and really useful. So that's what we're getting into today. So when you open a storage bin of sentimental stuff and feel completely stuck, even though you're a practical person and this is just stuff, I want to give you something today that's going to make those moments make a lot more sense and ultimately help you with deciding what to keep and what to let go of. This is episode 104, How to Let Go of Sentimental Clutter, but Keep What Really Matters. And this episode is about a very specific feeling that shows up when we try to declutter stuff from our own lives. Because you see, everything we own, from the things that we consider really sentimental, like the baby clothes that you stored away in a bin and the photo albums that your parents gave to you, to the things that we consider really utilitarian, like the skincare and makeup in our bathroom drawers and the pots and pans in our kitchens. All those things represent our history. They are part of the phases of our lives that we've we've either gone through or we're living right now. Okay, so the things that we consider classically sentimental, like the baby stuff and the photos, well, we know we might struggle with decluttering or organizing those things. But there are the things that look on the surface like they should be fine, like the makeup or the pots and pans. But for some reason, a lot of us find that something is holding us back from being able to make quick decisions about what to keep or let go of, even here. That feeling you get, I believe that it's not just guilt about getting rid of something that you spent money on. I believe that it's a type of grief. And once you identify that, I think that then you will be able to work through it and making decisions about your stuff will become easier to manage. And that's what I want to help you with today. Let me start by telling you about Carmen, a client of mine who was a recent empty nester. Her youngest had just moved to another city for work, not for college, but for his actual career, which somehow feels even more final, right? She hired me to help organize some storage spaces, including what had been the children's playroom. That playroom has a big closet. When we started sorting in there, there were bins of toy trucks, little toy horses, dolls, board games, all kinds of toys. And then deeper in, there were more bins, and these ones were full of baby clothes from when her kids were tiny. She was great at first, practical, making quick decisions. And then she opened a bin of those little toys and her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't that she wanted to keep it all. It was more that her body remembered what it felt like when that playroom was the center of the house, when her whole schedule was built around small children. And when she got to the baby clothes, some were stained, some of them had yellowed, but she held one of those tiny onesies, and we could just tell that she was somewhere else entirely. She was back in those days, back in what it felt like to be a young mom holding that tiny person. Right then, she didn't need me to tell her what to do. What she needed was for someone to name what was actually happening. And what was happening was this: Carmen was going through a good amount of grief for a phase of life that she had loved, but that had passed, a phase that she missed in some ways, right? And those bins were the last physical evidence of it. And once I named that for her, once she understood what she was actually dealing with and that it was grieving that past life that she had gone through, she could work. She made really good decisions that afternoon. She kept a handful of things that were really special. I remember there was the toy horse that her daughter had carried everywhere, and a few specific outfits from each child that had a lot of good memories around them. The rest, well, she wasn't ready to just let go of them that very day, but we packed them up into a few bins and we labeled them old baby clothes and old kids' toys. And over the course of the next year, I went back to her house for maintenance sessions. And during the first maintenance session, before I was finishing, I asked if she was ready to let go of anything in those bins. So we pulled them out, and she did let some things go. And we did that during the next 3 maintenance sessions. And each time she had separated some things for donating to Lotus House, which is a local women's and children's homeless shelter, and some things she gave away to friends and family. She was slowly letting these things go warmly, without guilt, with a lot of clarity about what she was choosing to keep for herself and her grown kids as small tokens for a whole lot of great memories. That's the thing that almost never gets said about decluttering. When our stuff connects to a past chapter of our lives, letting it go can feel like erasing that chapter. So we stop, we close the bin, promise ourselves that, yeah, we'll deal with it later. And later becomes a lot of laters, and the bins just multiply. But here's what I found: once you can name that grief and mourning that's underneath it, those decisions start to pick up. So let me walk you through some of the stages where this shows up, because it really does show up at nearly every age and every phase of life. For me, one of these stages that hit really hard was when the baby phase ends. Nobody marks this moment specifically. There's no ceremony for the last time a onesie gets worn. The baby phase just becomes past tense. While you're not looking, you're living your life, right? And the stuff from that time, the infant gear, the tiny clothes, the bouncy seat that's been in the corner of the garage for 3 years, well, that all becomes the only physical proof that it happened, other than your actual children themselves, of course, but they're a lot bigger now. If you've been holding on to your baby things and you're not quite sure why, it might be because releasing them feels like officially closing that chapter, like admitting out loud, that stage is done. I am done having kids. And even if you don't miss the sleep deprivation, and I know you do not, there's still something real to acknowledge about the fact that it's over. It's a stage that I had to mourn for a while before I could get rid of the random amounts of baby things that I had kept. The good news is you don't have to keep everything to honor and remember that phase. You just have to keep the right things, and we'll get to that. Now, other stages that we live through are when our kids cross into new phases of their lives. This happens in smaller versions all through parenting. There's the shift from elementary to middle school, the year they stopped wanting to trick or treat, the sports equipment from the sport they quit after years of practices and games. the art supplies from that 6-month painting phase they went through really intensely, and then they never touched again. Now, guys, though, that sport that they quit after 6 months in fourth grade, that equipment you can let go of with zero ceremony. But the other stuff, the milestone stuff, it tends to stick around. And the question of what to do with it is really a different question that you have to ask yourself. Have I actually acknowledged, even to myself, that we've moved on? Most of the time, no. We either never ask ourselves that, or the answer is no. I haven't come to terms with the passing of that phase of my kids' lives. And so, no, I'm not ready to release all those things. So the stuff stays as a kind of placeholder while we catch up emotionally, which is very human and also very solvable. Now, another stage that there is ceremony around is when a child leaves home. And this is a big one, their room. The freeze that happens around a child's bedroom after they leave is one of the most common things I see. And it makes complete sense, right? Because that room isn't just a room, it's evidence of a whole chapter of your life as a parent, the daily hands on, every morning and every evening version of parenting. Researchers call something like this ambush feelings, the kind that don't show up on schedule, but they arrive through a sensory trigger instead. Like you're doing laundry and you're completely fine, and then you find a sweatshirt. And it's not about the sweatshirt at all, it's about everything that the sweatshirt represents and the memories and the feelings that it holds for you. A lot of parents at this stage start asking a question that they've been too busy to ask for the last 18 or 22 years. Who am I now when I'm not needed in that same constant way anymore? Now, that's a much bigger question than just any bedroom, but the bedroom is where it tends to show up. And here's what I've seen happen when people can name that question clearly. They start making real progress because now they know what they're actually working through. It's not just a bedroom to declutter or reorganize or repurpose. It's the beginning of stepping into the next chapter of your own life, which is, by the way, a very exciting chapter. Now, some of the tricky stages we live through are our own transitions. So, back to my unopened moving boxes for a minute, because this doesn't only happen with parenting, it happens with our own chapters too, right? So, those 4 sealed boxes that I've been moving from house to house for over a decade were from my corporate career, a career that I worked really hard at and that had been really proud of. When that chapter closed, I packed those awards and that badge and I brought them with me everywhere we moved without ever opening them. And I understand now why I did that, because opening them would have meant sitting with the reality that that chapter was officially over, that the woman who had learned so much on that job had become technically good at what she did, had become a leader and someone who people sought out for her knowledge. That person who earned those awards was a real version of me and also a past version. And I wasn't quite ready to say to myself that that chapter was officially over for a long time, apparently for more than a decade, right? Well, career transitions do this to people all the time. Leaving a job you loved, leaving the workforce to raise children, and suddenly not having the professional title, the rhythm, the identity that came with it. Coming back to work after years at home and not quite fitting cleanly into either world yet, right? Or starting something new while that old chapter is literally sitting in boxes in the closet. The stuff from those chapters, the files, the work bag, the framed certificates, the textbooks, and the research projects and papers from the degree that you worked so hard for, that stuff tends to stay put while we figure out who we're becoming next. And here's what I want you to know, that's okay. It's a completely understandable response. It just doesn't have to stay forever. And I want to take a second here to mention something about your parents, because maybe you aren't the one facing the big transition right now. Maybe your parents are. Maybe you've watched them struggle with leaving their family home, the dining table that seated 14 people, the holiday dishes that they're hanging on to, the guest room that held 30 years of family visits. And maybe you felt a little impatient because the smaller place makes practical sense for them to move into now. The resistance for them of having them move, the resistance that they feel is harder to understand. Well, like you just heard, here's what may actually be going on. Your parents may not have had a chance yet to acknowledge the chapter of life that that house represents for them, the years of raising kids, the holidays, the identity of being the anchor, the home base that everybody came back to. That identity doesn't automatically transfer to a smaller house, even when the move makes complete sense logistically and practically. If you have a parent who's stalling, before you feel frustrated, try asking yourself, what chapter of their life does that house hold? And then approach them with curiosity instead of urgency. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is to just say it. This house held so many important years, guys. Of course, it's hard to leave it. Of course, it's hard to give away the dishes or the furniture. That kind of acknowledgement often does more than any organizing plan ever can. It opens a door. And then together, you can start talking about what they want to carry forward in their downsized home and what they still need to mourn that's past. And that's a really beautiful conversation to have, even if it is difficult. So, what actually helps? What will actually help you make decisions and actually be able to declutter and let some of these things go? This is the practical piece. And I want to keep this simple because it is simple. When you're standing in front of a bin or a box or a bedroom that feels impossible to sort, start with one question. Am I keeping this because it still serves my life going forward? Or am I keeping this because I haven't said goodbye to this chapter yet? If it's the second one that you haven't said goodbye yet, well, that's really useful information. It means the feeling needs more time to absorb or to marinate, as I call it, before the decisions can happen. So, trying to force the decisions before that is usually why people stall. And then they feel bad about stalling. And then they avoid the whole project for another year because they think they just can't face that stuff. When you're ready to move, here's what I've seen actually work. Name the phase, say it or write it down. This is from when I was whatever the phase was. That almost too simple act does something. It takes the thing out of limbo, that phase out of limbo, and puts it somewhere in your actual history where it belongs. And then allow yourself to say what you're feeling about it. Is it sadness that this phase has passed? Have you had a chance to grieve that version of you? Can you look back at it with nostalgia, but also with warmth and happiness too? If yes, then you're ready to move to the next step. If no, well, give yourself a little time to think about that time of your life and to think about your life right now and in the future. What are you moving towards? What are you looking forward to? Name those things because that can really help ground you in the present instead of falling back into the past. So when you are ready to move forward, pick one thing, one item on purpose, one item that truly represents that chapter, something you can see and hold or actually use, not something that you necessarily seal back up into a bin forever, right? You're keeping this thing as a keepsake, a memory trigger, not to mummify it. So keep that one thing with intention, let it mean something. And I say one thing, but yes, it can be several. It just shouldn't be your baby's entire wardrobe from birth to age 3, right? And then start to release the rest without the story that we tell ourselves that releasing all of this means that you've lost it or you're giving all of that up. Donating the baby gear doesn't mean you're done loving that phase of your life and your children's lives. Clearing out the old files and graduate school papers doesn't mean that that career didn't count or that you're not a Stanford graduate or whatever. You don't lose the chapter by releasing the evidence of it. Your memories are yours. They aren't in the bins. This is, at its core, what the clarify step in my Clear 5 framework is doing at a moment like this. It's not just asking what you want the space to look like, it's asking who are you now and what does your space need to support your actual current life. That reframe is often all it takes to get things moving again. So, to pull all this together, when decluttering stalls at life's transitions, it's usually not about the stuff itself. It's about the fact that your stuff is carrying real feelings from real phases of your life. Some of those feelings could be grief that that particular phase of life is done, the end of the baby years, a kid growing up and leaving, a career chapter closing, a family home being left behind. And once you can name what's underneath the stall, once you can say, I'm holding on to this because I haven't said goodbye to this chapter yet, then the item stops having so much power over the decision. The whole decluttering project gets lighter, even if it takes months or a year or more. The choosy approach here isn't ruthlessness, it's intention. Keep one thing or a few things on purpose. Release the rest without guilt, without regret, and make room for the life you're actually in right now and for the one you want to live coming up. That's how you honor where you've been and step fully into where you're going. So I want you to think of one person in your life who's right in the middle of a transition right now. Maybe she just became an empty nester. Maybe she's shifting careers, or her parents are facing a big move, a big downsize, and she's been trying to help them figure it out. Or maybe she's told you she wants to clear things out and start fresh, but something is holding her back and she hasn't had the words for it yet. Well, text her this episode. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do for someone in a life change is hand them language for what they're already feeling. The chapter you're leaving was real. It mattered. The version of you who lived it, who earned those awards, who dressed those babies, who made that house into a home, she was real too. And the chapter you're stepping into, that one's real as well. And there's a lot of good in it. You can honor where you've been and still make room for where you're going. That's the choosy way. So keep being choosy, okay? I'm Z, and I'll see you in the next episode.